Well, we've got the Brian Peckford litigation challenging the federal travel mandates. Canada is one of the few countries in the world now that has any restrictions left on travel. Even Greece and Switzerland are recent examples of countries that just within the past week have dropped their restrictions. I mean, these are utterly unscientific. The vaccine manufacturers themselves have stated publicly that the vaccines don't stop the spread, and everybody knows this. We know this from our experiences with the Delta variant, with the Omicron variant. The vaccine does not stop the spread. So I think it's a political punishment that Trudeau is meting out to the unpopular minority of people that have not taken the COVID shots. So that case is moving ahead. That is significant. Here in Alberta, we've just announced that we are representing a student who's filing a human rights complaint against NAIT, Northern Alberta Institute of Technology in Edmonton, which in a very arrogant and cavalier fashion denied a student's request for a religious exemption and simply declared essentially that his religious objection just wasn't valid, as if that institution is able to get into his mind and heart. So that's another one of our cases. Good news in Calgary. The city of Calgary filed an injunction application to ban peaceful protests. Sorry, not to ban peaceful protests, but to make it possible for police to immediately arrest and handcuff and imprison somebody if they honk their horn too loud or if they were outside of a designated area downtown. So that was positive development and very, very sinister on the part of the city to have sought and obtained that injunction ex parte without notice to anybody. Secret court application to secure an injunction. And now the city has just said, okay, we're abandoning that.
I think some people have speculated, though, also with the city abandoning that, is that they were worried that they might feel compelled to apply it to people celebrating hockey on the Red Mile down there. And they didn't want to get into that sticky situation. So they just kind of quietly dumped it and backed off. It wasn't really a good point of principle. It was more, I mean, a good outcome is a good outcome no matter what the reasoning. But it's unfortunate it was ever imposed in the first place.
Well, what's interesting about the city of Calgary injunction is that it ties in with the same issue that we saw with pastors getting jailed in Alberta over not complying with the health orders. And Premier Jason Kenney has said, well, I can't interfere with what Crown prosecutors are doing. I can't interfere with the rulings of judges, which is true. But there's a very specific reason why in Alberta we jailed pastors, whereas in other provinces did not jail pastors. And the reason is that Premier Kenney's government went to court, like what the city of Calgary has done. They went to court to get an injunction to enforce the health orders. And what that does is it transforms your regular, ordinary law enforcement, where a public health officer or a policeman might give you a ticket for violating one of the silly COVID rules, and then you get to plead not guilty to the ticket, and you can potentially challenge the constitutionality of the health order under which the ticket was given. And this is kind of your normal law enforcement. Now, what the Kenney government did was they went to court and they obtained injunctions for such that if a policeman or public health order officer believed that you were violating a health order, they could immediately arrest you, handcuff you, and throw you in jail. And that was Jason Kenney's government that sought and obtained those injunctions. And so that completely transforms the law enforcement, because now if you're caught, if a policeman sees you and believes that you're breaking a health order, instead of getting a ticket, you're now in contempt of a court order, and the police can immediately arrest you and jail you. And that's what Jason Kenney did in Alberta, is to change the law enforcement through injunctions.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, you can periodically change the law to suit what you feel is an immediate need, in a sense, using an injunction. Are some of those cases with the pastors still active right now, or have those been resolved through the courts?
They're in various stages. We act for Pastor Coates, and he was charged for violating the Health Act because his church was not going along with these unscientific rules, and that case is still put in abeyance, waiting for the Court of Queen's Bench case, where we were cross-examining Dina Hinshaw in April. Waiting for a ruling in that case before the criminal action against Pastor Coates moves ahead.
Okay, so like, is there a mechanism though? I mean, I guess it's on the part of the government or the courts though, to, as we learn, as new information comes out, to back off and change. I mean, maybe a little bit could be excused if with Pastor Coates, it was early in the pandemic, people really felt he was putting the congregation was putting a number of people at risk. But we look in hindsight and we realize these larger gatherings, I mean, we're allowing the playoffs right now with everybody in stadiums, and yet the pandemic is still going, you know. Can they say, well, we've learned more, we're going to back off, it's done, sorry about that, and move on?
The Crown prosecutors do have discretion to withdraw tickets. We're sending out a news release, every second Tuesday, just about on, more and more tickets getting dropped. Just recently in British Columbia, there's a woman got a ticket for $5,750. She had gone to the US to obtain medical care. She came back and she had a staph infection affecting her nose. And she said, I don't want to take a PCR test because it's a danger to my health. I might get infected, or maybe it was a lot of pain involved. I don't know what the reasons were. And nope. Bang, there's your $5,750 ticket for refusing to take a PCR test. So we brought that up with the Crown. We wrote a letter. We explained the situation, and so we had another ticket dropped. We're getting these tickets dropped all the time, but some of them are going ahead to trial.
Yeah, well, and then likewise with other things. I mean, it's like you're playing whack-a-mole with these vaccine mandates in private institutions and public ones. The early stages of vaccination, we were sold on, or a number of people were, that this is a vaccination like others. It would prevent spread. It would stop it. So again, I mean, it's still arguable as to whether or not you could impose mandates, but people could understand maybe a little more rationale. You're protecting your neighbors, the people next to you. But we know now that vaccines, for whatever benefit they may give, it's not stopping the spread. So, I mean, the justification for these mandates is long gone, yet we're still seeing it. And it seems you have to fight tooth and nail to get every one of these repealed.
Well, it was really tragic to see in September that Nate and I think it was 9 other post-secondary institutions, I think that included University of Calgary, University of Alberta, Mount Royal University in Calgary. They all got together, and after students had paid their tuition, and that was on, without strings attached, no conditions. It was, you pay your tuition, go to school in September, and suddenly in September they come out with these vaccine passports, and these post-secondary institutions, these taxpayer-funded institutions, suddenly started demanding that every student on campus get injected with a substance for which there's no long-term safety data in respect of a virus, which with precious few exceptions, it does not pose a threat to the 20-year-olds and 22-year-olds and 18-year-olds who form the vast majority of students on campus. And yet we've had so many cases where the university expelled students and even refused to accommodate students by providing online instruction, which the prior year, the whole campus had been online. Like, it's not like they don't have the technology to do it, but just an incredible arrogance and very vicious attitude towards a minority. Just despicable to see that in a country that considers itself to be progressive and tolerant and enlightened. But as it's been said, society never becomes truly more tolerant, but rather we just shift the object of our intolerance.
Yeah, and going further with the mandates, one that you didn't mention, I saw your release was for soldiers with the vaccine mandates, and you've got another lawyer on that case.
Yes, we've retained a lawyer who himself is former military, who knows the system really well. We are representing 20 Canadian Armed Forces members. This is still, statement of claim has not yet been filed, but they are being treated horribly and forced out in a way that is somewhat analogous to a dishonorable discharge. I don't know the military terminology, but we're taking the Canadian Armed Forces to court over that because they too, like the universities and other institutions, have been very irrational, very unscientific. And in all of these cases, we're demanding that the employer or the government agency, they have the onus of putting forward the proof that these vaccine mandates were necessary and backed up by science.
Yeah, well, lots to carry on with. So, I mean, going further, and maybe this ties more into the Peckford case. Like the concern is, we're going to be working through the legal after effects of this last couple of years, probably for some years to come. But what can we do then to ensure it doesn't happen again? Like that's the next fear. We're trying to go through the course with the people who've had their rights infringed on this time. But until we see some legislative or possibly constitutional changes, there's nothing to say we won't have to go through this all over again if some sort of emergency or that the government wants to declare emergency will prompt them to override our rights again.
Well, we're in grave danger of moving further along to a communist Chinese social credit system. We released a short video on this within the past week. I think it's on our website. The social credit system in China is not the political party that governed Alberta for 35 years or that was in power in BC, and it's not the federal party. But the social credit system in China, the government uses the technology to monitor where citizens go, who they hang out with, what they do, their purchases, their banking, whether they get on a plane or a train, what groups or activities they're involved in, whether they're praising the government on their Twitter accounts. So the government's watching every citizen very closely. And if you're well behaved as determined by the Chinese Communist Party, and you're a good Communist Party supporter, and if they like your behavior, you get extra privileges, like you get less frequent inspections of your business. You might get a slightly lower interest rate when you go to the bank. If you have a low social credit score, then you can be denied access onto a train or a subway or a plane because the technology is being used that if you have a low social credit score, you get blocked and you can't go to certain hotels or restaurants. So we experienced a small version of that when we had vaccine passports enforced, turning many Albertans and Canadians across the country into second-class citizens. If you did not get injected with COVID vaccine, you were denied the basic human dignity of being able to go to a restaurant or participate in sports or go to the gym. And even currently, you can't get on an airplane. So we have a lot of work cut out ahead of us to restore freedom because governments can use digital ID to implement a social credit system in Canada, like what we actually had under vaccine passports.
Yeah, that's another big one we can see rolling towards us. I hope enough people pay attention. A term we used to hear a lot and we don't hear often anymore was social engineering. That was a big one. And that's, where the state was trying to control what we think and what we do. And, social credit is more getting towards, well, how we're going to do it as an enforcement arm to ensure that you stay, keeping that new speak going and walking the line. It's very troublesome. And as lots of people like to point out, things that were called conspiracies 2 years ago have come into being today. So, I mean, as they say, it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you.
I remember so vividly in March of 2020 when lockdowns were first brought in, after they'd been in for a few weeks, and it was already becoming obvious to any thinking person that looked at data, was becoming very obvious very early on that this was not the Spanish flu of 1918. Neil Ferguson's prediction about, over 300,000 deaths in Canada from COVID within a few months, proving to be completely false. But and I remember vividly, there were people saying, you know what, they're going to use these lockdowns as a mechanism to entice everybody to get vaccinated. And they're going to say the only way to get rid of lockdowns is to get injected. And then you're going to have the whole population get injected. And then when there's a few stragglers, they're going to bring in vaccine passports to really apply pressure. And they're going to pressure everybody to get vaccinated. And that was a conspiracy theory in early 2020. And, as you said, that became reality, that conspiracy theory.
Yeah, so people got to pay attention to the warning signs now. Just to finally, with the truckers' protests in Ottawa and things such as that, is the JCCF representing any of the people who have been charged under that, or is that through different lawyers at this point now?
Yes, we are, in the sense that we've got at least a half dozen, if not a dozen, criminal defense lawyers that we have retained. So the Justice Center is paying the bills for the criminal defense counsel for the truckers that were wrongfully charged with criminal conduct, when, in our view, was absolutely false. I mean, the worst thing that the truckers were guilty of is parking infractions. And even there, that's questionable, because the Ottawa police was working with the truckers every day and telling the truckers where to park. So yes, we're paying for the legal defense for criminal defense counsel for truckers that have been accused of criminal conduct.
Great. Yeah, I know there's a lot of fallout there and things on the go as well. Well, plenty on the go, and as we've kind of said, plenty to come. Where can people find more information on your organization in case they want to keep up with it, or if they need legal help, or if they want to support you guys?
So our website's www.jccf, F as in freedom.ca, jccf.ca. Would encourage people to sign up we have a newsletter that we send out once every 3 weeks or so, and sign up for the newsletter, and that will give you an update on all of our cases. And there's also an icon on the homepage that says "Need legal help?" ? If you need legal help, complete the online form, and we have an intake team that looks at all of the incoming requests. We are forced through limited resources. We actually have to say no to most of the requests coming in, but we try to say yes to as many as possible and provide legal help to people.